Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And today we're going to talk about Ben & Jerry's recent tweet. I believe it was a tweet. I don't know if it was more than that. But Ben & Jerry's tweeted out, we will no longer be selling ice cream in occupied Palestine, I think is what it said. And of course, this is a very controversial thing to say. Ben & Jerry's, to my knowledge, is founded by two hippy-dippy guys in the 60s who I think happen to be of Jewish descent, but their politics are what drive them, which is what drives, I think, everyone, not politics specifically, but ideas, philosophy, ethics, what they believe to be right and wrong. And we've seen Ben & Jerry's participate in all types of leftist initiatives or causes, voice support for various things. Certainly with BLM and probably immigration. I mean, you name it. They're Bernie bros, and probably within a few years, if Bernie won, they would think Bernie is too far to the right. So that's who Ben & Jerry is. That's who Ben & Jerry's is, or that's who Ben & Jerry are. And that's what they tweeted out. And of course, this evoked a lot of responses. Let's get into this. We've got a guy here. He is from Greece. That is, if you don't know, a country, a nation that failed to conquer Israel at least once, probably more than once. There's one time that the Israelis are still celebrating to this day on the holiday of Hanukkah. But what I wish all Israelis would understand is that the reason their country is even worth living in at all is because of its Greek elements, by which I mean Western philosophy made Israel something more desirable than some two-bit kingdom in the ancient world. Let's welcome him, everybody. Nikos Sotirakopoulos.
Thank you, Rucka. Today I was planning to show up with a Greek flag. Turns out the Greek flag is too big too. But it's a happy day for Greece because our boy Giannis Antetokounmpo won his first NBA ring. He made a fantastic game. Greece was up at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch the game. And I don't want to say, oh, I'm proud as a Greek because I had zero to do with Giannis' achievement. But those of us, and I have to say this was the majority of Greek society, who empathize with his story, the son of immigrants born in Greece, went through struggles, but he achieved. He made his first dream reality, which was to play in the NBA. And I think within 7-8 years, he's the champion. So that has nothing to do with the show, although maybe it has something to do because I enjoy achievement. I love seeing achievement. I love seeing people happy. So Giannis, a salute to you.
Which reminds us, you have a book out on tribalism.
Yes, that's why I said I'm not, quote, proud as a Greek. But I enjoy Giannis' success because I feel a bit closer to him in a non-tribal way. Okay, so the Ben & Jerry story. Now, we could catch it from different angles. My first angle, whenever someone is saying something about the quote, the occupied Palestinian territories is, I mean, it's going to sound a bit snobbish, but I would like to present to these people an empty map of the Middle East and ask them, okay, show me where is Israel and where is the West Bank and where is all that. I assume that with Ben & Jerry's, they would pass the test. I think one has some relation to Israel. I'm not even 100% sure. I should have done more homework. I was too preoccupied with the Giannis celebration. So that's my first test. My first test is, do these people really know what they're talking about? Do they know about the Israeli conflict? Do they know, for example, what happened in 46, what happened in 47, what happened in Yom Kippur, what happened in 67? Once someone has passed all these tests, because no offense, if you don't pass these tests, I'm not going to have the discussion because it's going to be a waste of time. Then my next question will be, okay, you have an issue with the occupied territories. I get that. These are some regions that are partly under something which is close to a military occupation, although there is also some element of self-rule. But my question would be this, and it's always this. What's your solution? What is your solution? Should Israelis have absolutely zero control in West Bank? And should Fatah, who is in control of the West Bank, say, okay, come here, Hezbollah, come here, Rev Guards, it's all good. We're like 20 kilometers or even closer from big areas with Israelis, but it's okay to have our arm launchers here, no problem. So I always wonder how these people who find it so easily to gesture when it comes to Israel, to make this big move and say, we are taking our business away from the occupied territories. What is actually their take on the story? So I know, for example, a lot of leftists who tell me, yes, it is okay for Palestine to have their complete rule, including inviting revolutionary guards or whatever, because national sovereignty or whatever. Or I know others who are these, they have this humanitarian vision, one state, no armies whatsoever. But when someone makes such a strong statement, because again, Ben & Jerry's makes a very strong statement with this. My question is, what are you trying to achieve, and what is your solution? So, okay, you oppose the Israeli presence there. What do you think should have happened? So, for example, after 67, should Israel said, oh, you attacked us from there, but now take it back? No problem. Or should at some point say, okay, look, well, you still want to fight us, but we're gonna be the largest part here. Take it back, no questions asked, no issue there. Or if it's not one of these, what is your solution on the topic? So that's the one angle I always want to take on this issue. So when it comes to the Arab-Israeli conflict. Another angle that we could take, and I'll let you choose which is the angle, is the usual discussion around hypocrisy. Because you do a little research and you see, for example, that Ben & Jerry's is present, for example, in United Arab Emirates. And one wonders, is there anything happening there in terms of how particular groups of people are treated that would invite someone to raise an eyebrow? So again, the question is, why specifically Israel? Is it because it's low risk in terms of that we're going to get a lot of likes and all that stuff? Someone could say it's not low risk because there's a strong Israeli lobby, let's say, among conservatives in the US, so this is gonna hit back. So Rucka, you are the one who usually doesn't want to make judgments that are, too tribalistic, so to speak. So how do you judge this move? Do you judge it as a sincere move? And do you think that these people actually have a view of the Arab-Israeli conflict and they're taking a take which could be productive in some way or the other?
It's unclear to me what this tweet actually says about Ben & Jerry's. Like, was this a premeditated thing by the whole company, or was it someone in charge of their social media did something or no?
It's a policy, and the policy says we are not selling in the settlements.
Oh, I thought I assumed. I mean, this was wrong of me to assume. I thought occupied Palestine meant that all of Israel is an occupied. No. I thought they were taking a page out of the Arab textbook, which is what they teach in Syria and Iraq before the invasion of the US. Probably still do, but occupy. There's no mention of Israel in those textbooks. So I thought they were saying Israel itself, like they're stopping to sell. So I'm now I understand they're talking about the settlements.
Shall we read the whole announcement again, just to be fair to the viewers and to the comedy? Mm-hmm. So the tweet, because this started with a tweet, the tweet says, Ben & Jerry's will end sales of our ice cream in the occupied Palestinian territory. Now, if you read the whole statement, it says, we have a long-standing partnership with our licensee who manufactures Ben & Jerry's ice cream in Israel and distributes it in the region. We have been working to change this. And so we have informed our licensee that we will not renew the license agreement when it expires at the end of next year. Although Ben & Jerry's will no longer be sold in the OPT, Occupied Palestinian Territory, we will stay in Israel through a different arrangement. We will share an update on this as soon as we're ready. So probably not only the Israeli statements, the way I understand it is, even if you're an Arab in West Banks, you're not going to be able to buy Ben & Jerry's. Which is one of the reasons why I found it a bit weird. Like, who are you really punishing here, and why are you making this? But anyway, again, I wanted to start by giving the benefit of the doubt. Maybe there's something there. Maybe these people have a view on the topic, and because I didn't want to go full attack, that's why I started with this introduction.
Mm-hmm. No, so I thought, like I said, I thought they were completely boycotting Israel in its entirety. But the fact that they're boycotting the settlements, which is really preventing Palestinians from getting their ice cream. I mean, I think it speaks to the point that I make whenever Israel is brought up, which is that in the view of the left, which is to say the view of the mainstream, the anti-capitalist, anti-Western view, any presence of industry, of science, of individualism, of a constitutional republic or some similar system is in itself a crime against indigenous life, because, you know, the way they see it, the Palestinians, by virtue of being less advanced, less bound to rule of law, are the indigenous people. And it doesn't matter if you point out, no, what do you mean? Most of the Palestinian families moved there when Jews were there they moved there for work opportunities. Doesn't matter to them. Doesn't matter. What matters to them is that one side is more advanced, more civilized, more Western, more Greek, really, if you trace back the influences far enough. And the other side is far less those things. And the side that is far less Western is inherently more virtuous, more innocent. They can do no wrong. No matter what they do, it's only an act of resistance against imperialism. That's the way people see it. And you see the positions that Ben and Jerry's have taken, which is to say, like others like-minded like them, it's always equity, quote unquote, right? Equity. So if one group of people is more economically successful than another, that must mean, in their view, that the less successful group is being oppressed. And what I find interesting, this is there's an Israeli or an Israeli sympathetic account that I follow on Twitter, which is really funny, very witty, I'll say, very witty, called Mossad.
Yeah,
it's the Mossad IL, like Israel IL. So the Mossad IL.
That's a funny one. Yeah,
they're very funny, and so in a rare instance of them kind of breaking the fourth wall and just being serious, here's what they said. I want to read this. They said, "Our feelings about Ben and Jerry's. You have every right to enact your values through your company. You have made it clear your values are politically driven, and while most companies choose not to divide their customers, you do. Your choice." Then they go on. "Jews, 95% of whom consider themselves Zionists, are under constant attack around the world. You decided to side with an extremist group of anti-Semites with ties to internationally recognized terror organizations." I think they're referring to BDS. "We can't log into Facebook, Twitter, even LinkedIn without being under a barrage of attacks. Jews are by far the most targeted by hate crime year after year, according to FBI statistics. And now 95% of Jews can't even eat ice cream without feeling attacked. You completely threw your Israeli franchisee at Ben and Jerry's Israel under the bus. You just put factory workers, sales staff, administration, Jews, Arabs, and other minorities out of work because of your misguided, half-informed decision. Again, it's your right to make whatever decision you make. Okay, you put your values, however rooted in anti-Semitism they are, over your bottom line. But we will not allow you to make Ben and Jerry's Israel and their employees victims to your ill-gotten decisions." And now this is why I wanted to read this. Here's the final tweet of that thread, the Mossad IL. This is a parody account, not really the Mossad, but here's what they said next. They go, "Some of your values are great. Fighting climate change, racial justice, refugee rights, but succumbing to the demands of anti-Semitic groups with integral ties to terrorism like BDS, who disguise themselves as human rights activists, is harmful. You just embolden Jew hate." So what I find interesting is that, I mean, you see this by left-leaning Jewish people in America and probably around the world. Certainly the majority of Jews in America are Democrats, are left-leaning. I don't know at what point you'd call them liberal and at what point you'd call them leftists, but very left-leaning when it comes to BLM, when it comes to racial equity, when it comes to social justice. You see largely people of Jewish descent are sympathetic to the left. But then when it comes to Israel, the case that people try to make, that Jewish people try to make, and this is why Israel's biggest problem is not its enemies, but its defenders, just like capitalism, as Ayn Rand points out. Capitalism's biggest problem is not its enemies, but its alleged defenders. The way that a lot of Jewish people try to defend Israel is by saying, no. They say Jews are the indigenous people of that region. Jews are a hated minority, which is I guess true. Jews are technically the indigenous people of that region, unless you trace it back even further. And then you've got some other kooky tribe in the ancient world. But also they're saying, no, look how much anti-Semitism there is in the world. So basically they're relying on anti-Semitism to exist to justify Israel. But they should be defending Israel the way that I defend Israel, which is that Israel is a civilization bound by rule of law. There's judges, there's a legal process. It's not ruled by despots. It's not ruled by clerics. As much as religious people have more influence than I'm comfortable with, it is still night and day more civilized and bound by rule of law than the surrounding regions. Certainly the people attacking Israel physically, violently. So Israel, the people who want to defend Israel should defend it because it's a Western country. The way I did at the start of this program, I said it's Israel's Greek elements, by which I mean Western philosophy. That should be the way people defend Israel. That is the way objectivists have defended Israel, which shaped the way I look at the whole conflict in the region. But because you see people defending Israel by saying, no, Jews are the oppressed ones, Jews are the hated ones, you're not going to be able to convince anybody. You're not going to be able to convince people who believe in this whole racial equity BS. You're not going to be able to convince them that the industrial Silicon Valley of the Middle East are the oppressed ones and that the lunatics in the surrounding region are the ones oppressing them. You're not going to convince that people because the way people see it, they just see strong versus weak. So the more prosperous and free Israel is, the more guilty they are. So it's just good luck with that.
And you see it's so interesting. You see people who are on the barricades for women's rights, for LGBT rights, worthy causes. And you see them sympathetic to Hezbollah, which literally means the party of God. And of course, when you're the party of God, it comes with a baggage. But so I don't want to make this who is worse. But again, I'm very interested in, shall we point out here the hypocrisy? For example, if you see the central Ben and Jerry tweet, below that you see Netanyahu Jr., Yair, I think he's the son of Bibi. Are you ending your sales in occupied North Cyprus or in occupied Kurdistan too? Or below that, Chernovich says, will you stop selling in China? And of course, these have tons of likes and stuff, so they're very high. Someone else is saying, I assume he's a CEO of a supermarket chain or something, we are having a board meeting this afternoon to discuss ending sales of your ice cream in our supermarket chain. So my last question to you, Rucka, is this. What should be our take? So we don't like what Ben and Jerry did. We have different understanding of justice, or to put it in the terms of Elan Journo's great book, What Justice Demands in the Middle East. We want a good life for every Palestinian as an individual, and that's why I don't want to use collectivistic terms when it comes to them. But at the same time, we understand what justice demands here. So the situation is this. How would you deal with Ben and Jerry when it comes to you, your friends, if you had the business? Would you, for example, now boycott it? Or would this be you buying into the culture wars and you biting on this whole atmosphere? I lean more towards the first in terms of, you know what, I don't want to deal with you because your values are not close to my values. And by the way, sorry, there is one very legitimate claim of many Palestinians which said, I've lost my property. And then you see that Ben and Jerry's, they are Bernie fans, and actually they made an ice cream specifically two ice creams in honor of Bernie Sanders. One was only, let's say, a special version, the other was out. And the mass-produced version, it had, let's say, one layer on top, which was 1/10, and the symbolism was, this is the 1%, this is everyone else. And if you follow Bernie, the idea is there's something there, so I need to go and grab it because that's justice. So again, that's why I asked this question at the beginning. How exactly do they want to influence the situation in the Middle East? For example, do they want to make sure that Palestinians have their individual rights, individual Palestinians have their rights protected, in which case join the club? Or is this amorphous thing? Well, I have no idea what's happening there. Again, my usual test. What happened in 48? Even more, what happened in 46 and 47 that led to 48? What happened in 64? What happened in Yom Kippur? So, or is it this amorphous? I have no idea what happens there, but yay, for me, I'm a good guy.
I mean, look, Yeah, I'm not big on boycotts personally. I just don't think about it that much. But maybe, I probably, if I'm buying ice cream, which I rarely do, I'll probably not go with Ben and Jerry's. But like, look, leftists, one of the many ways that the left is suicidal is that before they even have time to, impose their policy on the country, they tend to basically bend over for barbarians to kill them. So like, Israel is the one place in the Middle East where you can be a leftist. Israel is the one. I mean, the Israeli universities is where all the social justice, anti-Israel intellectuals are coming out of. Israel is one of the social justice capitals of the world. I mean, look, a bunch of Jewish hyper intellectuals. What would you expect, right? Hoping to see that move towards, the Ayn Rand philosophy, and then Israel could become a remarkably positive force for good intellectually. But like, so the leftists are sort of conflicted about things like Israel and any Western country for that matter. On one hand, a place like Israel and other Western countries is the only place you can be a feminist and gay and all these things. On the other hand, altruism says, the altruism of the anti-Western mentality says, that capitalism and a Western country is inherently oppressing the non-Western, non-capitalist nearby peoples. So there's nothing Israel can do. There's no argument. They can bring up 1948. They can bring up, 3000 BC. It doesn't matter. There's no argument that's going to change people's minds. And you and I know this because we used to be on the left and different types of left. I know in my own introspective kind of backtracking, I remember it didn't matter if Israel was the freer of the two sides of this conflict because I was anti-life, anti-individualism, anti-Western, anti-capitalist. So therefore, the more capitalist country was the guilty one. I'm curious how you, as a former communist, remember seeing Israel. Is it because they were capitalist that you saw them as the good guys, or is it that the Palestinians were a common enemy against the West?
It was mostly because they were allies of the United States to begin with, but then also everything else you said. But mostly it was who is the big guy and who is the small guy. Of course, if you see, that's why I keep repeating this ad nauseum. Go back to 48 and tell me who is the David and who is the Goliath. David Goliath. And Goliath. I don't know how you call it in English.
Goliath.
Yes. So even if you take it from this point of view, you should be with Israel. Again, historically, if you see it, how it's happening. And I have one message to my leftist friends. When you start thinking that people who, again, their name is the party of God or who talk about jihad and all that stuff, and if you think there is a good God bedfellows, go and check in Wikipedia what happened to the secular leftist leader of Afghanistan when the Taliban entered Kabul. But don't do it before you go to bed because you're going to have nightmares at night. So again, this idea that, because these people because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, again, you're very lucky that you're far, far, far away from these people or ask what happened to today, what happened to the Iranian Communist Party when Khomeini came to power. But to finish on a lighter note, I want to agree that ice creams are generally way too overrated. I think Ross in Friends has a line with which I agree. He said something like, ice cream is way too cold. So I agree. I'm a bigger fan of Greek yogurt, more protein. So I won't be losing much sleep on whether I should boycott Ben and Jerry. But you didn't, you said about boycott in general, but do you think that if you liked something, if you liked a service, let's say not Ben and Jerry, something you enjoy, and they had such a view that you'd find appalling, would you consider it, quote, a sacrifice not to consume it? An example
would be what?
I think you got the point. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yes, I think it is best to kind of select what you purchase based on your values. But at the same time, it's like, so Israel's problem is not Ben and Jerry's. Israel's problem is Israel. Israel needs to grow a spine. They need to get intellectual clarity, moral clarity about what it is they're doing over there, what their what the point of that country being there is. It's to be a free country a prosperous country where the individual can live the life that the individual wants. Anyone who gets in the way of that needs to be immediately sent a clear message that shenanigans will not be tolerated. If Ben & Jerry wants to do this, that's Ben & Jerry's business. I disagree that ice cream is overrated. I think it's wonderful, but it's very difficult to stay in shape while eating just nothing but spoonsful of sugar, which is basically all that crap is, right? Now, I will say this, Ben & Jerry's, so I'm reading a book now called The Culting of Brands, which I bring up occasionally when I do solo episodes. Ben & Jerry's, their niche, they were originally like the hippie brand. So even though they were not going to reach everyone, but the certain people they were reaching, the tree-hugging hippies they were reaching, made it a very lucrative business. And that continues to this day. But again, I mean, the question remains, like the question keeps coming up, how should the left feel about something like Israel? On one hand, yeah, it's the David against Goliath. It's this historically very oppressed people, the Jews, and it's a place where with the biggest gay parade in the world. That's on one hand. On the other hand, clearly the stronger of the two sides in this conflict, clearly a richer, more capitalist side of the conflict. So this is, look, the left is suicidal. The leftists are cannibals. They eat their own, they eat themselves. They will continue to chase their own tail until something better comes along to fill the void that is left open by these nihilists. What say you? I read some super chats.
I would say yes.
LMF with $2. Thank you. Jonathan Honig with $4.99 says, in defense of Chubby Hubby. Mary Aline with $2. Thank you. Zalmi with $1.99 says, Ben & Jerry's Yasser Arafudge. Pretty clever. He then adds another super chat, says Vanilla Wok Bar. By the way, follow the Mossad IL on Twitter. They had some funny.
And by the way, I can't get the ice cream jokes because the other day I learned there's a ice cream which called the thing that has a lot. Anyway, I don't even know the names. No, not sardo. That's the bread. Anyway,
CJ with $2 Canadian says Ben & Jerry Mossad chocolate chip. I don't even get is there a play on words on there, or Mossad chocolate chip? Is there a chocolate chip? I don't get it. We don't get it. Marilyn with $4. Thank you. Phil with £5 says, I hope their licensee sues their backsides off for breach of contract. I'd contribute to a crowd-funded legal slush fund for them. That's nice of you, Phil. I mean, again, like my opinion is Israel's problem is Israel. Israel's problem is not a broken contract from Ben & Jerry's or whatever it is Ben & Jerry's are doing. Ben & Jerry's have their lawyers. I'm sure whatever they do will be probably, safe legally, but I don't know.
Here's something I was thinking about it today.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if they lose money and they're proud about it, because there is something like that in self-sacrifice. Perhaps my most embarrassing moment ever was when in the riots of Athens in 2008, my father's office was, the entrance in the ground was demolished, as it happened with almost every building in the center of Athens. And I remember, you see, now I also suffered. Therefore, now I can support the riots with even more fervor. Because it's again this idea, I suffered, you can't tell me anything. Remember Eugene Lawson in Atlas Shrugged, who says, I'm morally superior because I've never made any profit in my life. So the leftist has this mindset. So even if Ben & Jerry loses loads of money in this, they would say, even better. Now we're even purer in how we see ourselves.
So as the book that I'm reading sort of highlights, it's not, yes, altruism says sacrifice, but also a good business model in many cases means like give up the certain profits and you'll end up with a much bigger one or a much more secure one with a certain crowd. So the hippie generation did an excellent job, and this will be the topic of one of my solo episodes the next time I'm called upon to do that. Something like The Body Shop. They did an excellent job at taking the altruism and the incoherence of the hippie culture and turning it into a very, very lucrative business model, which allows the consumer to both indulge but also feel virtuous. So there's a lot to get into there. All right, CJ with $2 Canadian retracted his message. It was some kind of Ben & Jerry's play on words again that didn't really make any sense. With all due respect, it was not a play on words. It was just piecing things together. Look to guys like Zalmi the Jewish guy. He knows comedy. He says, Zombie with 199 says Ben and Jerry's anti-cement. There you go. That's the name of a Ben and Jerry's flavor in the future. But I hate to point out, I think he's just looking these up and taking them. But at least Zalmi's smart enough to know which jokes to steal. He says, with $4.99, Ben and Jerry's Iron Dome with spelled DOUGHM. Okay, very
that's
clever.
Like an ice cream thing.
Well, dough, like cookie dough, right?
Oh,
yeah. Sorry, I don't know if there's a Greek yogurt version of that. Mm-hmm.
I make also my own cookies with protein, zero sugar, but the recipe, when we reach 3,000 subscribers, I might release the recipe.
Nice. Zalmi.
Also, you mentioned that book you read about how the 60s became, let's say, good in marketing and all that stuff. Let me suggest one more book to you or to whoever is interested. It's called Commodify Your Descent. Commodify Your Descent. And another one is The Conquest of Cool, Business Culture, Counterculture, and the Rise of Hip Consumerism. I don't want to do book promotion, and you've told me I should, but okay. In the first book, The Rise of Lifestyle Activism, there is a section about the counterculture and how, basically on what you said, where I've used these books, particularly Commodify Your Descent.
Thank you. Zalmi with 199 says Ben and Zona. Okay, that's we don't use that kind of language here. It means it's like Israeli swearing. He's bringing into, imagine speaking that. Thank you for the super chat. CJ with $2 Canadian says, I was trying to play on mint chocolate chip. Oops. All right. Well, you tried. That's all Jesus asks of you. All right, everybody. I guess with that, we can move it over to Clubhouse. This was a wonderful discussion. Thank you all. Okay, a couple announcements. Razi reminds us at 7 p.m. UK time, James Valiant discusses Rand's essay, The Establishing of an Establishment. And then at 9 p.m. UK time, which is 4 Eastern, on Radio Ragnar, that's our Clubhouse channel, the premiere of Lee Pearson's new show, Cutting Edge Issues in Objectivist Thought. Today's topic, the evolution of volition. Some questions for evolutionary psychology and objectivism. A lot happening, folks. Please consider becoming an Ayn Rand Center UK member to help this thing exist, grow, and gain access to exclusive content and study groups. Trust me, it's good. Thank you all for your super chats today. Thank you all for your participation. And with all that being said, I guess we'll jump over to Clubhouse.
We will jump to Clubhouse, and thanks everyone, and more cookie, protein, or Greek yogurt recipes soon. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.